Hello everyone, welcome back. This is number 14 of the House of History Prussia series / Frederick the Great. So we're going to go ahead and excuse me. We're going to go ahead and continue. Demise of a Prussian general, the Battle of Moys, 1757. I'm guessing on the name. Video.
The 18th century was not known for its rapid communication. During the 7 Years' War, this was no different. By early September, Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, was still oblivious to Field Marshal Hans von Lewald's defeat at the Battle of Groß-Jägersdorf over a week earlier. In fact, the spirits in the Prussian camp are described as being pretty optimistic during this time. But the war was dragging on, and frankly, Prussia's position was anything but to be happy about. At this stage of the war, there were roughly 3 fronts Prussia had to consider. The Russians were a source for worry in the east, although frankly after Groß-Jägersdorf they did not follow up their victory and left the Duchy of Prussia alone. To the south, the Austrians pestered the Silesian and Saxon frontiers, and to the west, the French and Imperial Army were becoming a major worry for the Prussian king. In July at Hastenbeck, the Duke of Cumberland suffered a defeat against the French army. This freed the French and Imperial Army to link up and move against Prussia's western border. As for the Saxon-Silesian front, we left it right after Prussia's defeat at Landeshut in early August. The door to Silesia was left wide open. The strategic situation was roughly as follows. Habsburg commanders Nadashti, Beck and Arenberg, among many others, roamed the Silesian frontier. The Duke of Brunswick-Bevern, assisted by General Winterfeld, held the gateways to Silesia with some 40,000 soldiers around Görlitz. He was to report any severe incursions against the Silesian territory as soon as they happened. To the west, the defeat at Hastenbeck led to negotiations between France and Hanover. These negotiations would eventually result in the Convention of Klosterzeven, leading to Hanover's withdrawal from the war and partial occupation by France. The convention wasn't signed until September 10, but by late August the writing was already on the wall. At Dresden, Frederick, Keith and Moritz planned accordingly. Since their Hanoverian allies would soon be of no use, they prepared for a march against the combined French Imperial Army in the west. If that army linked up with the Austrians, it would all be over. This was their only hope, to save Prussia's western flank, and with it, its existence. They commanded some 25,000 soldiers, a vastly inferior number to the French Imperial armies. In Bohemia to the east, besides the commanders of irregulars, Field Marshal Daun commanded around 75,000 soldiers. Being a notoriously cautious and patient commander, he mainly roamed around in friendly territory, attempting to find an opening into the Silesian heartland. For weeks, skirmishes continued along the entire frontier, but none of them proved decisive, nor did any of them seduce the other side to engage in a large-scale battle. Not for a lack of trying on Prussia's side, by the way, but the Austrian commanders understood they enjoyed a numerical and supply superiority. Time was on their side. There was no reason to engage in a major battle. For example, the Austrian army was firmly entrenched in Zittau. There was no reason for them to move, and for Prussia it was impossible to launch any type of assault. As they sustained constant harassment by irregulars, the relationship between Bevern and Winterfeld was nothing to write home about. Frederick purposefully left Winterfeld together with Bevern as the aging duke did not have the king's complete confidence. This dynamic caused embarrassment for Bevern and annoyance for Winterfeld, who did not like the fact his superior impeded his autonomy. The Prussian army was roughly split in two with this dynamic in mind. Bevern commanded 30,000 soldiers holding the strategically well-fortified Görlitz. Winterfeld commanded some 10,000 soldiers on the right bank of the Neisse River, nearby Moys. They were close to each other, very close, but they were still separate. In Vienna, the lack of initiative by Prince Charles and Daun rubbed Maria Theresa the wrong way, ever since the war had broken out. In late August, she sent one of her many letters to Prince Charles, goading him into action. He had to retake Silesia, especially now that Frederick was preoccupied in the west. Unbeknownst to her, recent developments highly played in their favor. It spurred Charles to take action finally. Nadashti seized a strategic position near Seidenberg, close to Winterfeld's encampment. The time was right not just to enter Silesia, but hopefully seize the entire province and push through Saxony and perhaps even Brandenburg. If done correctly, they could decapitate Prussia. They could, at least, sever its limbs. On the morning of September 7, Prince Charles ordered Nadashti to move into Silesia along the right bank of the Neisse. Daun, commanding the main Austrian army, followed him closely in case things went wrong. To the west of the Neisse lay Görlitz, where most of the Prussian army, some 30,000 soldiers, camped. A wooden bridge over the Neisse connected Görlitz and Moys. At Moys, Winterfeld's 10,000-strong corps camped. On the morning of September 7, Nadashti reached the vicinity of Moys. He commanded between 20 and 26,000 soldiers, including artillery. 5,000 of them were cavalry, and a few thousand were irregulars, mainly Croats and Hungarians. Winterfeld's soldiers were outnumbered at least 2 to 1. The Austrians swiftly expelled some outposts at Hermsdorf and Leopoldshain. That morning, Winterfeld was absent. He likely was in a meeting with Bevern across the Neisse. The fact the commander was absent, as the Prussian scouts noticed Nadashti's numerous army approach from the southeast, could have impeded the deployment stages of many armies with a centralized command structure at the time. But thanks to Frederick's military reforms, many Prussian units acted autonomously. When the scouts warned them of the approaching army, they took their positions accordingly.
I'm going to guess that that's something that wasn't done. You know, your commander dictated everything, and these guys were kind of allowed to a certain amount of leeway in how they were going to, they kind of knew what they had to do, so they were just told, just go do that. It's interesting. Apologize for not pausing a whole lot. I'm just kind of, sometimes I just enjoy it and forget that I should talk, which I have nothing to add, so I'm just wasting time right now, so that it seems like I'm asking very important things. Video.
General von Zieten commanded the left wing of the Prussian army, consisting of 35 squadrons of cavalry and 8 battalions of infantry. 2,000 Prussian grenadiers stood on the slope of the Jakobsberg in front of Moys, to the southeast of the main army. The remainder of the army was positioned on Moys' outskirts. The Austrians divided their army in 2 parts. On the right, they occupied Hermsdorf and Leopoldshain. The left, commanded by Arenberg, preyed on the Jakobsberg. To the south of Moys, 2 Hussar regiments roamed around looking for an opening. Nadashti's order to open artillery fire from the hill north of Tilitz marked the start of the battle. At 6 a.m., an enormous bombardment erupted. After briefly battering the Prussian lines, the Duke of Arenberg launched his attack. Commanding 6 companies, they marched uphill through the plain against the Prussians, who were hastily taking their positions. Additionally, some 1,000 Croat irregulars joined the advance. They stormed the Jakobsberg. The Prussians and Austrians heavily clashed on the slopes of the hill. Despite their numerical inferiority, Prussian tenacity initially showed. The Austrians, scaling slopes, engaged in heavy close combat with the Prussians. These managed to maintain control of the battlefield and halt the Austrian advance. Firing their characteristic volleys, they tore into the Austrian lines, inflicting significant casualties. When the smoke cleared, the first wave of Austrians retreated. The attack was repelled, for now. Winterfeld heard noise of battle from a distance. Around this time, he likely also learned the Prussians' outposts had been expelled by a much larger force. He deduced this wasn't just a slight skirmish, but in fact a major assault. So he rallied as many men as he could, and with some 5 battalions he returned to Moys. Nadashdi ordered a renewed assault, this time with more soldiers. Significantly outnumbering the Prussians, the Austrians moved forward against the Prussian vanguard. Duke Arenberg, on the left, again launched an attack against the Jakobsberg. The remainder of the infantry marched against the Langeberg in front of Moys. The Prussians on the Langeberg launched volley after volley. The artillery tore up the Austrian lines, but around the Jakobsberg, slowly the Austrians pushed the Prussians up the mountain. This continued until Arenberg's vanguard reached the outskirts of Moys. Around this time, Winterfeld arrived. He found a scattered and cluttered battlefield, chaotic, with his troops pushed back by the much more numerous Austrians. On the Landberg, savage hand-to-hand combat erupted. Whereas the Austrians initially enjoyed an advantage, now Winterfeld's fresh battalions pushed back the attack. But their advantage was short-lived. Nadashdi urged on the attack, and 22 additional cavalry squadrons and infantry joined the fight. Winterfeld understood he didn't stand a chance against the numerically superior army. Messengers rushed to and fro Bevern's camp requesting reinforcements, but these reinforcements never arrived.
Ooh.
Combat continued for about an hour, but it was clear the Austrians were pushing into the Prussian lines. During a counterattack, Winterfeld was struck by a bullet in his spine. Eyewitness accounts reveal Winterfeld spent his last moments alive, giving orders to his subordinates. He remained conscious until the end. After a few hours of heavy, close-quarter combat, Nadashdi finally enjoyed part of his vanguard in a strategic position on the rises. He used his numerical superiority. Part of his army managed to circumvent the Prussians around the Jakobsberg. They attacked the Prussian lines from the flank. Zieten attempted to mount a relief effort, but Nadashdi held enough reserves to quickly nip this in the bud. At around 1:30 p.m., the Prussians began the retreat over the bridge towards Görlitz. By this time, the severity of the situation dawned on the commanders there. Prussian batteries across the Neisse ensured the Austrians couldn't pursue the retreating Prussians. Then again, the Austrians didn't want to. They were more than happy with their victory. The Battle of Moys is a footnote of the 7 Years' War, but the casualties and especially the subsequent events tell another story. The Prussians lost some 2,000 men, with severe losses among several battalions. The 41st Infantry defending the Jakobsberg, for example, lost 204 dead and 68 wounded by the end of the battle. The 21st Infantry lost 376 men. Among the casualties were 51 officers and General Winterfeld. Meanwhile,
Winterfeld shot in the spine. Oh. Oh. I wonder if he was paralyzed. You know, like his final... Well, I guess he would be maybe paralyzed from like the legs down or something. I guess it would depend on where he was shot at, but still. Oh, brutal.
The Austrians suffered around 1,500 casualties, both killed and wounded. 79 officers, around 1,300 wounded, and 200 dead or missing. It is briefly worth reflecting on why Bevern didn't send any reinforcements to support Winterfeld. Redman rightly argues that the personal animosity between the commanders is not enough reason. It indeed isn't. Perhaps Bevern wrongly believed Winterfeld was winning the battle, or that the situation wasn't as serious as it actually was. Credible primary sources did not survive the test of time, if they ever existed at all. All that is known is that there's no denying more could have been done to save Winterfeld's army.
Yeah.
Now, bad news quickly followed each other up. So firstly, Frederick learned of Lewald's defeat at Groß-Jägersdorf. That same day, the Convention of Klooster-Zeevern was signed, confirming Hanover's withdrawal from the war. The same week, the Swedish army landed in Pomerania. But, perhaps most importantly, Bevern decided to retreat deeper into Silesia because of the defeat. During his retreat, irregulars commanded by General Beck harassed him along the way. Bevern's withdrawal would have far-reaching consequences for the course of the war. Frederick initially was none the wiser about Winterfeld's death. A letter from September 14, 1757 survives. In it, Frederick writes to Winterfeld, "Everything is going splendidly here, but I am very worried by a rumor which has come to me from Lusatia. I don't know what to make of it. They write me from Dresden that you have been killed, but from Berlin that you received a minor cut in the shoulder." Frederick ended up learning.
Well, those are two vastly different kinds of things to happen to somebody.
The truth shortly thereafter. Winterfeld's death impacted him, much more so than Schwerin's. Duffy writes that toward the end of his life, he was discussing the Battle of Moys, when he burst out. "That was where Winterfeld was killed. He was a good man, a man of soul. He was my friend." His great eyes brimmed with tears as he looked towards the window. He opened the casement and stood there some time before he turned back to Reichel and sent him on his way with a perceptible softening in his voice. "Good night. I am obliged to you." As for Winterfeld's remains, they were returned to Prussia 2 days after the battle under the flag of a truce. The next few weeks, Bevern's army was chased by 90,000 Austrians, and in the west, trouble continued brewing as well. There was no end in sight for Prussia's war on multiple fronts. The next decisive moment would be the Battle of Rosbach, where Prussia's future and its existence would be decided. Thank you very much.
Wow. He really cared for that guy. So, yeah, Frederick really cared for Winterfeld. I mean, I hope he cared for him more as a, just as a total person instead of just, he was just my military guy. But it sounds like, he cared for him across the board. He just cared for him, period. Do you understand what I'm saying on that? It's like sometimes you like an athlete, but you don't care for them outside of your sport. Does that make any sense? I hope it does. It makes sense to me. Wow. And the thing is, what really just bugs me about this series, I like the series. What bugs me is that most of the problems that happen seem to be caused by Frederick the Great. Oh well. Well, like and subscribe to this. I almost said this video. You can, hey, House of History would love you to like and subscribe to his channel, but you need to like and subscribe to mine, or one night you're going to be sleeping and you're going to wake up and there's going to be just a wolverine and a badger they're just going to be attacking your testicles. So have a good day, have a good night.